12 Angry Men wasn't just a courtroom drama, it was a revolutionary cinematic experiment that almost never made it to theaters. Behind the sweltering set where temperatures deliberately soared past 100 degrees, a first time film director fought studio executives who wanted to slash his budget. Actors nearly collapsed from heat exhaustion during 12-hour shooting days. A masterpiece of American cinema was filmed in just 19 days, with a camera technique that hadn't been attempted before in a major motion picture. In the next few minutes, I'm going to reveal 20 weird facts about 12 Angry Men that even the most dedicated film buffs might not know. And stick around for our bonus fact: the shocking truth about how this film, now considered one of the greatest ever made, was initially a catastrophic box office failure that almost ended several careers. So let's break down what really happened in that claustrophobic jury room that changed cinema forever. Number 1. The brutal heat was intentional. What audiences saw as sweat-drenched jurors wasn't Hollywood magic. It was real suffering. Director Sidney Lumet deliberately cranked the studio temperature past 100 degrees during filming, not for actor comfort, but for authenticity. Lumet didn't just want actors to pretend they were uncomfortable, he wanted them to physically experience the grueling conditions of a New York jury room without air conditioning. As filming progressed, he systematically increased the temperature day by day. For early scenes, the set was kept at a manageable 80 degrees, but as tensions mounted in the script, so did the heat, pushing past 100 degrees for the film's most intense confrontations. Actor John Fiedler later recalled, "We weren't acting the heat and discomfort. We were living it. By the final day, our clothes weren't just costume design, they were salt-stained proof of Lumet's method." Number 2. It was shot in just 19 days. 12 Angry Men wasn't filmed over months like most prestige pictures of its era. It was captured in a breathless 19-day sprint that more closely resembled television production than cinema. This wasn't artistic choice, but financial necessity. United Artists allocated a minuscule $340,000 budget, equivalent to about $3.5 million today. Practically nothing for a feature film, even in 1957. This meant no second chances, no luxury of multiple takes, and a ruthlessly efficient shooting schedule. Lumet, fresh from television directing, meticulously planned every shot, every movement, every line reading before cameras rolled. The actors rehearsed for 2 solid weeks before filming began, an almost unheard of luxury that paid dividends when the pressure was on. The result wasn't compromised filmmaking, but distilled cinema. A lean, focused production where every frame counted. Not a sprawling Hollywood epic, but a pressure cooker of human emotion captured in real time. Number 3. Henry Fonda mortgaged his house to make the film what audiences didn't know. While watching Henry Fonda's principled Juror number 8 was that the actor had literally bet his home on the film's success. United Artists remained skeptical about the commercial prospects of a dialogue-driven film confined to a single room. When budget discussions stalled, Fonda didn't just accept the lead role, he became the film's co-producer and put his own money into the production. Studio executives still hesitated. In a move of extraordinary faith, Fonda reportedly mortgaged his house to help secure the remaining financing needed. He believed so deeply in the material that he was willing to risk personal financial ruin. The devastating irony: when 12 Angry Men initially flopped at the box office, Fonda's investment appeared doomed. It would take years of critical reappraisal and television broadcasts before the film found its audience, and before Fonda's extraordinary gamble paid off through the film's eventual classic status. Number 4. The revolutionary camera technique. The visual language of 12 Angry Men wasn't random. It was a calculated psychological experiment on the audience. Lumet and cinematographer Boris Kaufman employed a revolutionary approach to lens selection that hadn't been attempted in mainstream cinema. They began the film using longer lenses placed at greater distances, creating a relatively flat, objective visual style. But as the story progressed, they systematically switched to wider angle lenses placed increasingly closer to the actors. This subtle shift, imperceptible to casual viewers, created mounting visual tension. The ceiling gradually appears in more shots. The walls seem to close in. By the film's climax, the cameras are using 18mm and 25mm lenses, extremely wide for the era, creating distorted, claustrophobic images that subconsciously communicate the psychological pressure. Kaufman explained, "We weren't just filming a story. We were manipulating the audience's sense of space to create anxiety. The room literally appears to shrink as the film progresses." Number 5. The real-life juror who changed everything. The screenplay wasn't just clever fiction, it was born from writer Reginald Rose's actual jury service in the early 1950s. Rose sat on a manslaughter case that transformed his understanding of justice. What audiences don't realize is that Rose himself was essentially juror number 8 in his real jury experience. Like Fonda's character, Rose found himself the lone dissenting voice in a room pushing for quick conviction. The intense deliberations and personality clashes he experienced during 3 days of heated debate became the blueprint for his screenplay. Rose never revealed the specific case that inspired him, but court records indicate he served on a 1954 manslaughter trial in Manhattan. His first-hand encounter with the fragility of the justice system and how close it came to convicting potentially innocent defendants haunted him for years. "I was stunned by how easily justice could miscarry," Rose later wrote, "not through malice, but through indifference, through people just wanting to go home." Number 6. The Mystery of Juror. Number 2. Eagle-eyed viewers might notice something odd about juror number 2, played by John Fiedler. Unlike every other character, his occupation and background remain almost completely mysterious. This wasn't an oversight, but a deliberate choice. Original production notes reveal that Lumet and Rose intentionally kept this character's background vague to represent the everyman juror, the ordinary citizen who could be anyone. What's more shocking, Fiedler's character originally had a complete backstory as an accountant with detailed personality traits. During rehearsals, Lumet made the radical decision to strip this away, instructing Fiedler to play the character with deliberate ambiguity. "Sidney told me to be a blank slate," Fiedler recalled years later. He said, "I want the audience to project themselves onto you. You're not any specific person. You're everyone who's ever felt pressured to go along with the crowd." This experimental approach created the unsettling feeling that juror number 2 could be anyone, including the viewer, forced to make a life or death decision. Number 7. The knife that almost killed the production. The switchblade knife, the film's central piece of evidence, became the source of surprising off-screen drama that nearly derailed production. The prop department initially secured a period-appropriate switchblade that exactly matched the murder weapon described in the script. However, 3 days before filming, New York Police Department officers confiscated it during a routine studio inspection. The problem? The knife was actually illegal to possess in New York City, even as a film prop. This created a frantic scramble. Production assistants searched through 5 boroughs trying to find a legal replacement that would match the script's description. With less than 24 hours before filming the crucial knife demonstration scene, they still had nothing suitable. The solution came from an unlikely source: Henry Fonda himself. An avid collector, Fonda happened to own several vintage pocket knives. He brought his personal collection to set, and the distinctive switchblade seen in the film, with its unusual ornate handle, was actually Fonda's own property, loaned to save the production. Number 8. The missing juror names. One of the film's most distinctive choices, never revealing the jurors' names, wasn't in the original screenplay. It emerged from a production mistake that transformed into artistic triumph. Reginald Rose's television script included specific names for each juror. During pre-production, these names appeared in the working screenplay. However, during the rushed 2-week rehearsal period, the actors kept forgetting their character names since they rarely addressed each other by name in the dialogue. Rather than fight this, Lumet made a bold decision. He stripped all names from the script entirely, referring to characters only by juror number. What began as a practical workaround became one of the film's most powerful artistic choices, emphasizing how justice often depends on anonymous citizens whose personal identities become secondary to their civic role. Lee J. Cobb, who played the antagonistic juror number 3, later said, "Removing our names lifted the story out of the specific and into the universal. We weren't individuals anymore. We were aspects of society itself." Number 9. The bathroom that didn't exist. Sharp-eyed viewers might notice something odd about the jury room. Despite numerous references to heat and discomfort, no one ever asked to use a bathroom, and none is ever shown. This wasn't an oversight, but a deliberate choice that sparked heated debates between Lumet and the studio. Production designers originally included a small bathroom connected to the jury room, historically accurate for New York courthouses of the period. Lumet controversially ordered it removed from the set design. When studio executives questioned this choice, pointing out the unrealism of 12 men deliberating for hours without bathroom breaks, Lumet stood firm. His reasoning was psychological. "I want the audience to feel the jurors' imprisonment. No escapes, No relief, no private space to retreat to, just 12 men forced to confront each other and themselves. This artistic choice heightened the claustrophobia that makes the film so effective, creating a sealed pressure cooker from which there is no relief until justice is served. Number 10. The dangerous final scene that wasn't insured. The film's final rainstorm scene outside the courthouse wasn't just movie magic, it was a dangerous gamble that no modern production would attempt. Go ahead and like and subscribe because what I'm about to tell you reveals how filmmakers once risked everything for their craft in ways that would be unthinkable today. The production couldn't afford mechanical rain effects. Instead, they waited for an actual rainstorm to hit New York City. When one finally arrived during the final day of shooting, Lumet rushed his crew to the courthouse steps. The problem? Electrical camera equipment, lighting rigs, and live electrical cables were exposed to pouring rain, creating a legitimate electrocution hazard for cast and crew. Modern insurance would never permit such conditions. But in 1957, Lumet simply told his team, "Nobody touch metal and we'll be fine." The iconic final scene where Fonda and Joseph Sweeney, Juror number 9, exchanged names on the rain-soaked courthouse steps was filmed during a legitimate downpour with crew members risking electric shock with every movement. Cinematographer Boris Kaufman later admitted, "We could have been killed shooting that scene, but sometimes great cinema requires great risk." Number 11. The actor who couldn't read his lines. Jack Klugman, who played Juror number 5, harbored a secret that only his closest cast members knew. He struggled with severe dyslexia at a time when the condition was barely recognized, much less accommodated. Klugman's powerful performance is even more remarkable considering he couldn't actually read his lines from the script during preparation. Instead, he had his wife read the entire screenplay aloud to him repeatedly until he memorized it through pure auditory repetition. During rehearsals, Klugman would arrive hours early to have production assistants read scenes with him until he could perform without visible struggle. His method wasn't laziness, it was necessary adaptation for an undiagnosed learning disability. This limitation became strength. Unable to rely on traditional preparation methods, Klugman developed an extraordinary ear for dialogue rhythm and emotional truth. His performance as a juror from the slums who understands switchblades from personal experience emerged not despite his reading difficulties, but partially because of the alternative preparation methods they forced him to develop. Number 12. The director who had never made a film. Perhaps the most shocking behind-the-scenes fact. 12 Angry Men was Sidney Lumet's first feature film ever. Lumet wasn't just an inexperienced director, he had literally never directed a frame of cinema before being handed this psychologically complex, technically challenging production. His background was entirely in live television and theater directing. When Henry Fonda and producer Reginald Rose approached him to direct, studio executives balked. Entrusting a debut director with even this modestly budgeted film seemed like professional suicide. Fonda fought for Lumet, impressed by his television work on shows like Danger and You Are There. The gamble paid off extraordinarily. Lumet's theater background proved perfect for managing the ensemble cast, while his live TV experience had trained him in economical shooting methods essential for the tight schedule. The first-time filmmaker would go on to direct over 50 feature films, including classics like Dog Day Afternoon, Network, and The Verdict. But his debut remains perhaps his most perfectly executed work. Number 13. The deliberate continuity errors. What appears to casual viewers as continuity mistakes, changing sweat patterns, cigarettes that grow and shrink, water cooler levels that fluctuate, were actually intentional choices. Most films meticulously maintain continuity between shots. Lumet deliberately subverted this convention. He instructed his continuity supervisor to allow certain inconsistencies, particularly in sweat patterns on actors' clothing and the level of dishevelment in their appearance. His reasoning was psychological realism. In actual extended conversations, people's appearances naturally fluctuate. They sweat, then dry partially, then sweat again. Hair becomes messier, then gets unconsciously smooth, then messes again. Perfect continuity would have looked artificial, Lumet explained in his memoir. I wanted the deterioration of these men's appearances to feel organic, not mechanically consistent from shot to shot. This approach created subtle visual disorientation that heightened the psychological tension. Not sloppiness, but calculated visual strategy that prioritized emotional truth over technical perfection. A radical approach for 1950s Hollywood. Number 14. The table that shrank. The jury room table, around which most of the action occurs, wasn't a static piece of furniture. It was a precisely engineered psychological tool that physically transformed during filming. Production designer Robert Markel constructed the table with a remarkable feature. It could be imperceptibly reduced in size between filming days. The table began the shoot at standard conference room dimensions, but every few days of filming, it was replaced with a slightly smaller version, ultimately shrinking by nearly 6 inches in diameter by the final scenes. This created a subliminal sense of increasing confinement that audiences feel but never consciously notice. Combined with the changing lens techniques, the shrinking table amplified the psychological pressure cooker effect. Henry Fonda noted in a later interview, "None of us actors realized what was happening until about halfway through. We just felt increasingly crowded, increasingly on top of each other. That wasn't just acting, that was Sidney manipulating our environment to generate real tension." Number 15. The studio that hated it. United Artists didn't just undervalue 12 Angry Men, they actively tried to bury it after seeing the finished product. Studio executives were dismayed by the completed film. Despite the star power of Henry Fonda, they saw a dialogue-heavy, action-free drama confined to a single room as box office poison. Their marketing department essentially abandoned the film, allocating minimal promotional resources and releasing it in limited theaters. The studio's internal memo, uncovered years later, devastatingly noted, "Commercial prospects minimal. Recommend limited release to fulfill contractual obligations, then quick television sale to recoup losses." This studio abandonment led to the film's initial commercial failure. It earned back less than half its modest budget during its theatrical run, seemingly confirming executives' pessimism. Only years later, when European critics championed the film and American television broadcasts introduced it to wider audiences, did United Artists realize they had catastrophically mishandled what would become one of the most enduring films in their catalog. The studio's lack of faith became one of Hollywood's most short-sighted business decisions. Number 16. The courtroom you never see. One of the film's most distinctive choices, never showing the actual trial, wasn't artistic minimalism, but budgetary necessity transformed into strength. The original screenplay included extensive courtroom scenes showing testimony that jurors later reference. When budget constraints made these scenes impossible to film, Lumet faced a dilemma. Awkwardly modify the script or embrace the limitation. He chose the latter path, radically reconceiving the film to begin almost immediately in the jury room, with only a brief courtroom introduction. This constraint forced a revolutionary narrative approach. All case details had to emerge organically through deliberation rather than being shown directly. Lumet later claimed, "This budgetary restriction improved the film. Not seeing the trial forces the audience into the same position as the jurors, making judgments based on incomplete information and competing interpretations rather than objective reality." This approach, born from financial limitation rather than artistic intent, created the film's distinctive subjective perspective and ambiguity that continues to fuel debates about the case's true facts. Number 17. The Hidden War Commentary. What audiences in 1957 missed, but contemporary critics have uncovered, was the film's veiled commentary on McCarthyism and Cold War hysteria. The film was made at the tail end of the House Un-American Activities Committee investigations that had torn through Hollywood. Several cast and crew members had either been blacklisted or knew colleagues who were. The screenplay's emphasis on prejudice overriding rational judgment wasn't just about courtroom justice. It was a pointed critique of the anti-communist witch hunts. Juror number 10's bigoted rant against them ostensibly referenced socioeconomic and ethnic prejudice, but its structure and language deliberately echoed anti-communist paranoia of the era. When other jurors literally turned their backs on him, it represented the film industry's emerging rejection of McCarthyite tactics. This subtext remained largely unacknowledged in contemporary reviews. Only decades later did film historians recognize that 12 Angry Men wasn't just a courtroom drama, but a brave political statement made when such statements could still end careers. Number 18. The Dangerous Chair Stunt. The scene where Lee J. Cobb erupts in rage, throwing his chair against the wall, wasn't carefully choreographed stunt work. It was a dangerous improvisation that could have seriously injured other actors. The screenplay called for juror number 3 to react angrily, but specified no violent actions. During rehearsals, Cobb, a method actor trained by Lee Strasberg, found himself genuinely enraged in character. Without warning anyone, he grabbed his heavy wooden chair and hurled it across the room during a take. The chair narrowly missed hitting Jack Klugman and John Fiedler, splintering against the wall with surprising force. Lumet, rather than calling cut, kept cameras rolling to capture the genuine shock on other actors' faces. The take was so powerful it made the final cut but created tension on set. Several actors confronted Cobb afterward about the danger of his unannounced stunt. Cobb reportedly responded, "Sometimes truth isn't safe. Neither is justice. Modern productions would never permit such a dangerous, unplanned action, but the moment's raw power remains undeniable. Real fear registered on film." Number 19. The juror who was actually a convicted felon. In a twist worthy of the film itself, one actor in the jury room had first-hand experience with the criminal justice system from the defendant's side. Joseph Sweeney, who played elderly juror number 9, had served 8 months in prison decades earlier for fraud charges related to a theatrical investment scheme gone wrong. This conviction, occurring in the 1920s when Sweeney was a young theater producer, remained unknown to most of the cast and crew. Sweeney never volunteered this information during production. It only emerged years later in a theater historian's biography. Colleagues were stunned to learn that his nuanced performance, particularly his insights into how people's obsession with facts can obscure deeper truths, may have been informed by personal experience with justice system failings. When asked in a 1970 interview if his conviction informed his performance, the elderly Sweeney simply replied, "Let's just say I understood better than most how thin the line can be between those who judge and those being judged." Number 20. The ending that almost wasn't the film's perfect final scene, where jurors number 8 and number 9 exchanged names on the courthouse steps, wasn't in the original screenplay and almost didn't happen. Reginald Rose's script ended more conventionally, with all jurors going their separate ways after the verdict. During filming, Henry Fonda approached Lumet with concerns that this ending felt emotionally incomplete. He suggested the now iconic final exchange. Studio executives resisted the change, arguing it was too subtle and ambiguous. They pushed for a more explicit epilogue, revealing the defendant's actual guilt or innocence. Lumet and Fonda fought this suggestion vigorously, with Fonda reportedly threatening to withdraw permission to use his close-ups if the studio imposed such an ending. The compromise was the current conclusion, poetic and open-ended, yet emotionally satisfying. The two jurors who most represented conscience and wisdom briefly connecting before returning to their separate lives. Not an artificial resolution of all questions, but a human moment that acknowledges the temporary but meaningful bonds formed in pursuit of justice. Bonus fact, here's what almost no one knows about 12 Angry Men. It literally disappeared from American cinema history for nearly a decade after its release and was saved by a completely different country. After its commercial failure in 1957, United Artists essentially abandoned the film. Prints were recalled from theaters after brief runs, and the studio considered it a tax write-off. For the next 7 years, 12 Angry Men was rarely screened in America and began fading from cultural memory. Its salvation came from Europe, specifically France and Italy. European critics who had seen the film during its brief run began writing passionate defenses, recognizing its artistic significance when American reviewers had largely dismissed it. The prestigious Cahiers du Cinéma magazine featured a landmark essay in 1963 declaring it the most perfect example of American cinema's moral conscience. This European rediscovery prompted American television networks to acquire broadcast rights in the mid-1960s. These television screenings introduced the film to a massive new audience, sparking its critical reappraisal in America and eventually, establishing it as a classic. The film that American studios had written off as a failed experiment was saved by foreign critics who recognized what domestic audiences had missed. That 12 Angry Men wasn't just a courtroom drama, but a timeless examination of how justice, prejudice, and moral courage intersect in the most human of ways. Without this European second chance, one of America's greatest films might have been permanently lost to cinema history. 12 Angry Men wasn't just a movie about a deliberation. It was a testament to how ordinary people, both on screen and behind the cameras, can achieve extraordinary things when pushed to their limits. a commercial failure that became a critical masterpiece, a single room drama that expanded our understanding of justice itself. If you enjoyed these revelations about this cinematic masterpiece, go ahead and hit subscribe for more deep dives into the films that changed how we see ourselves. And remember what juror number 8 taught us? Sometimes the most powerful act is simply being willing to stand alone.